Joining us now for World Brief and a review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning to you from London. Let me tell you about what is happening around the world. And Trump's transition continues to take quite a controversial turn. That's as he chooses Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz as his Attorney General. Now, Attorney General is the most senior federal law enforcement officer. And his choice, his nomination in Matt Gaetz is quite controversial in the sense that Matt Gaetz himself does have quite serious legal issues before and behind him, most notably that of accusations of sexual misconduct with a minor, as well as financial impropriety. It is worth noting that Matt Gaetz has vehemently denied all charges against him, but it does go some way to tarnish his credibility. That being said, when we listen to what the Democrats have had to say, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both issuing a statement via email saying that this is not a good decision and they don't believe that this is something that is becoming of an Attorney General, and essentially telling the public, well, we told you so when it comes to voting Donald Trump. That being said, this appointment, as with many of Donald Trump's nominations, are going to be subject to Senate approval. But as we know, the Senate has fallen under Republican control. The Republicans have been able to establish this clean sweep we had been anticipating for quite a while, where they've also been able to take control of both arms of Congress, take control of the House. This is something that means that Donald Trump, once he is inaugurated, would be one of the more powerful presidents in U.S. history, with all forms of government under his control, in the sense that it is under Republican control rather, and definitely one that's more conducive to him and his choices. That being said, as we said, these choices are still going to be subject to Senate approval, even though the Senate is likely to be friendly to Donald Trump, being that it is under Republican control. But to go through some other nominations, we do know that Senator Marco Rubio has been nominated for Secretary of State, as well as South Dakota's John Thune. He's actually won the Senate leadership race to replace Mitch McConnell, and definitely a choice that you'd imagine that Donald Trump is happy with. Let's not also forget that Fox News' Pete Hegseth has been nominated for Secretary of Defense. Quite another colorful decision there. And when you look at the reactions on social media, especially between the Fox News host, between Matt Gaetz, it's definitely one that is seeing quite a lot of color and quite a lot of disappointment, clearly, in the quality of candidates that some people believe Donald Trump has picked. Let's not also forget that Elon Musk, as well as Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead a new department called Government Efficiency, a new department on government efficiency. We wonder what that will look like. So, as I said, the Donald Trump administration is taking form in quite a colorful and controversial way. That's as, of course, Donald Trump met with the current president, Joe Biden, at the White House. The White House had extended an invitation to President-elect Donald Trump last week, inviting him over to the White House, an invitation that he did honor yesterday, the two men sitting down, shaking hands and discussing the future. Clearly, the real focus of this meeting was for the Biden administration to highlight its dedication to a peaceful transition of power. So let's take a listen to what the gentlemen had to say in each other's presence. They spoke for about 2 hours. Let's take a listen, and then we'll come back for the papers.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President, and Donald, congratulations. Thank you. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome
Thank you
back.
very much, and thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
Well, Adefemi Akinsanya, they are talking about recent developments in the United States. I think the main issues are as follows. One, yesterday, President Biden and President Trump met in the White House. And Mrs. Biden, Jill Biden, handed over a note saying, please give this congratulatory note to Mrs. Melania Trump. a great show of civility. The same civility that that Trump, as president, did not extend to anybody in 2020. I think that is a great, lesson about human behavior. In fact, Donald Trump in 2021, January 2021, did not even attend the inauguration. And then you find another family leaving the White House saying, well, we are gracious people. Let's have tea, let's talk. And then at the end of it all, President Trump, all he could say was, oh, the world is a problematic place, but I think the world is in a nice place today. And I'm enthusiastic and appreciative of that. This narcissistic, man with a very big ego had to at least make it eventually about himself. But on the same day, the Republicans, the grand old party, GOP, sustained a majority in the House of Representatives. So they now have a majority in the House of Representatives, 208 to 218, and in the Senate, the Democrats have 47 to the Republicans having 52. So Donald Trump walked away from the White House shortly after with a resounding, overwhelming majority, which means that whatever he wants to do, he can just do it. I've written this week that what this tells us about is the American mind. The American mind now is completely right-wing and populist. And Donald Trump can just as well do with the rest of the world, or with America, to be specific, what he likes in the next 4 years. The second issue coming from the United States, which Adefemi focused upon, is about appointments. Now he has made Gates, it's Attorney General. Gates is, somebody who even has a sexual scandal issue that the House of Representatives was going to report about tomorrow. Now that has gone the other way, a flamethrower. He has made Peter Hegseth a talking head on Fox News, the Secretary of Defense, and it means he will be in charge of Pentagon. He has made, what's his name? Elon Musk and Ramaswamy, both of them business people. They are now going to be in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency. These are very controversial appointments. Even the South Dakota governor, Moetz, that he has put in charge of Homeland Security, is also being accused of not having relevant experience. What is the editorial point? The editorial point is as follows: that in Trump's first term, he had a team that looked even a bit professional. But this time around, appointing Marcus Rubio, appointing Matt Gaetz, appointing Moetz, South Dakota governor, appointing even, what is the name of this woman? Appointing even Mark Huckabee as ambassador to Israel. Mark Huckabee, who said publicly that there is nothing like Palestinians. So you see a pattern of appointments that are troubling, yes, that shows that Trump is not looking for professionalism. He's looking for loyalty. He's looking for an attempt to impose his own views. He's imposing on America and the world persons of slavishness. You know, these people who behave like they are slaves. Yeah. Whether you give them a job or you give them a position, they are slaves because that's how they are. We hope that America is not going to be run by persons of slavish fealty, which is what, this administration is showing us. But I summarize by saying that President Biden, and his wife showing great civility should be a lesson for all democracies. And it shows that President Biden is committed to his promise that he wants to ensure a smooth transition of power between the Biden administration and the returning, comeback, Trump administration.
So, a couple of things. I think Dr. Abati pretty much said it. This was a Trump that this time last year was already thinking his next plot to destroy America. He finally hatched it on the 6th of January when he rallied a crowd in front of the Capitol to take over the Capitol when they were counting elections. He rallied the crowd so much, his vice president, Mike Pence, was there, could have been killed. A lot of people got hurt. You know what he called those insurrectionists at the Capitol that day? He called them heroes and patriots of democracy. That's who Trump is. And that's why it's never common sense to support a divisive figure, because history teaches us a lot. We've seen this happen in the 30s in America. The America First group, the likes of Father Coughlin, then the adversary were the Jewish people, plotting division and enmity in the world. Trump, that didn't show this civility to Biden, didn't even attend Biden's inauguration. I took out time to read Hillary Clinton's book. Despite the pain she felt, she still went ahead to do what needed to be done. Kamala has congratulated and moved on, but Trump will never have done that. Then the appointments. And like you said rightly, we agree on a lot on Trump, Dr. Abati. At least in the last 10 years, we still had the likes of Rex Tillerson. We had the likes of Pompeo. We had the likes of some good heads. We had the likes of, Ben Carson to lead HUD. He was Secretary of HUD. That was a pediatric neurosurgeon of great repute. But look at the cabinet today. Very hard-right people. Where should I start from? Pete Hegseth? Oh, you remove a 4-star general, Lloyd Austin. See, there are only 200 4-star generals in the history of America. In fact, no, let me say it again. Lloyd Austin was the 200th 4-star general. Head of Central Command. Glorified soldier. Proper infantryman. You remove somebody of that character and caliber, and you put a Peter Hegseth that's just an officer. I checked his rank as a major in the National Guard because he does a veteran support program and a talking head on Fox News. The same man with tattoo all over his body that was selling AK-47 ammo, doing an influencer for AK-47 ammo. No, I was just giving full body description. And I said tattoos deliberately because of those cross tattoos, he was seen as a white supremacist, and he was removed from being the National Guard that was going to do, Biden's inauguration. So that's why I mentioned tattoo. So you put people like that. You put Marco Rubio, the same person Trump called Little Marco. That's why you were correct, Dr. Abati. It's slavery. The same Marco Rubio, that Trump has abused his life out. He still collected a job. Then you put Mike Huckabee, the same former Arkansas governor that we know is deep hate for the Arab nation. You put in there. You put Tulsi Gabbard in charge of security. Then you put Matt Gaetz with all his scandals and allegations. In fact, Trump 1.0 had a better cabinet pick. Although the argument there was that a lot of those boys were, the Goldman Sachs boys and everything, the likes of the Steve Munches of this world. But this?
Okay. So, in my opinion, I think one of the biggest developments yesterday with regards to positions was that of the conclusion of the Senate Majority Leader, who is John Thune, because ultimately all of these appointments will still need to go through the Senate. And we know how thorough that process can be, and we know how frustrating that process can be. So with John Thune, who is not a traditional Trump loyalist, however, what he did do immediately after securing the position of Senate Majority Leader is he assured Trump to try and that he would make sure Trump's agenda would sail through the Senate speedily. However, we know that, unlike in other countries where it's a bit of a rubber stamp process, we know that it's quite a rigorous process to get these appointments confirmed through the Senate. So for me, I'm quite intrigued, and I look forward to seeing how John Thune is going to manage the balance between Trump loyalists and traditional core Republicans, because ultimately that's what will determine what the final cabinet will look like. Having said that, of course, one of Trump's biggest campaign promises, narratives, conversations that was happening during the election was all about the deep state and the swamp in Washington, D.C. So he garnered a lot of support from the fact that he promised that he would clean out what he's calling the swamp. He promised that he would bring in outsiders who hadn't been, quote unquote, indoctrinated into the Washington, D.C. system. So in essence, this is a really big experiment. And I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how it plays out. Is it going to be a successful experiment, or is it going to come back and bite him in the back? Well, as somebody who's not coming back for another term, it's the Republican Party that will stand to suffer the consequences or to enjoy the reward, whichever way it goes. However, one major thing was to bring in the outsiders. Now, when you read some of the reports of the process of appointing, coming up with these names and so forth, they say it's very different to Trump's last tenure, which is that in his last tenure, all of this was done at Trump Tower. And, you would see high net worth individuals, VIPs coming in, so many photographs being taken in the lobby and so forth. But this time around, he's taken the process to Mar-a-Lago. It's a lot more discreet. There's a lot more privacy. And some have described the atmosphere around his appointments and cabinet picks as that of a startup. They say it's a very sort of free-spirited environment where, they're riding around on golf carts and having these conversations and discussions. So like I said, again, this is probably one of the biggest experiments we've seen with regards to cabinet appointments in U.S. history. And of course, we'll all be here to witness whether or not it pays off. But it's now time for us to move on to the newspaper headlines. So Adefemi, what do you have for us on the front pages of the newspapers?
Look at newspaper headlines happening across the world, and as ever we start in Nigeria with the front cover of This Day newspaper. This morning, This Day leads with National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu listing President Tinubu's gains when it comes to the fight against insecurity, and vows that he's going to crush this newly established terror group Luka Rawas. Moving on to the New Telegraph this morning, and the New Telegraph leads with an investigation that finds that the National Hajj Commission of Nigeria has performed woefully in the 2024 Hajj operation. That's despite a 90 billion naira subsidy fund extended to it by the federal government. Now, despite this controversial subsidy, the Hajj operation was marred by inadequate provision of accommodation in Mina and other insufficient basic travel allowances for programs from different states in the country. That, of course, has drawn criticism from state governors over the National Hajj Commission of Nigeria's management handling this religious exercise. Now, in August, you'll remember that President Tinubu did sack the chairman of the commission, Jalal Arabi, and replaced him with Professor Pakistan. Now, Arabi and the Nikon secretary, Abdullahi Kantagora, were both indicted in investigations by the EFCC because of impropriety. And this is just another example of that poor leadership when it comes to the huge monies allotted to this religious exercise. Moving on to the Daily Trust now. And the Daily Trust looks at human rights lawyer Femi Falana, who has criticized the Federal Capital Territory Minister, Nyesom Wike, over his recent actions concerning the demolition of houses and the provision of housing and cars to judges. Falana says that Wike's actions are unconstitutional and illegal. He stressed that if judges require housing, it should be managed by the National Judicial Council and not by the state or federal officials. Falana also pointed out that if the executive intends to assist the judiciary, the appropriate channel is through the National Assembly. Now, let us move on to The Guardian. Today is World Diabetes Day, and the cover of The Guardian looks at this epidemic and reports on how it is worsening as the cost of drugs hits 100,000 naira per patient per month. You'll remember that Arise environmental correspondent Leila Johnson-Salami did deliver a report last month looking at the price gouging when it comes to medication, and this is another example of that on this World Diabetes Day. And we are just days away from the governorship elections in Ondo State. The Tribune reports that President Tinubu has used the memory of late former Governor Rotimi Akeredolu to push for votes towards the APC candidate. Police also in Ondo State say that they are going to be operating a zero zero-tolerance policy when it comes to any actions against peace. Meanwhile, on the front cover of the Daily Sun, the federal government has put the cost of fixing power at $10 billion US. Goodness gracious me. Let's move on to some African papers now. And the Daily Nation of Kenya leads with news that Silicon Valley billionaire Meg Whitman has resigned as US ambassador to Kenya. She's held the position for 2 years, and her critics say that she became too close to President William Ruto's government. And this is, of course, happening as the new Trump administration takes place. Now, Whitman has also, despite the criticism, she has been praised for her achievements in terms of health, security, trade, and sorting out visa issues in the country. To the UK now, and the Daily Express has a dramatic U-turn on this Irfan Sharif case. He's the father accused of murdering his 10-year-old daughter, Sarah, after bounding and beating her with a cricket bat. He says now that he takes full responsibility for her death. He had, of course, previously blamed her death on his wife, which is Sarah's stepmother, who's also on trial along with another family member, but he has now admitted that his daughter died because of him, because of his actions. And finally, onto the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, opposition leader Kemi Badenoch has put pressure on Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer in terms of what he has to say when it comes to public financing. When the two were speaking head-to-head at PMQs yesterday, she was able to get him to admit that council tax will jump by an average of £110 next year. Those are the papers from around the world. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Adefemi Akinsoya. Well, I imagine that you are now in the United Kingdom. The last time I saw you, you were in the United States. Well, Trump meets Biden, but more important, The Guardian in London today tells us that Human Rights Watch has come up with a report that Israel is committing crimes against humanity, what we're being told for the umpteenth time by the international community. Thank you, Adefemi Akinsoya.